Emulation. Oh, how the gaming world has demonized such a word. You either despise it for its use as a tool used by the gaming pirates, or praise it as a simpler form of maintaining historical gaming experiences, an art form more involved than a passive viewing or simple listen. Only through emulation can you maintain its history and convey its context. What's up, internet? Welcome back. This is Linzer22. I'm on the boat that emulation is important not only to conserve lost forms of art, but to push the gaming industry into uncomfortable areas such as doing more than simply selling a badly emulated ROM or neglecting a classic game, leaving it unreleased because of, well, reasons. With emulation being accessible for those deep into the hobby, publishers have a responsibility to make a product above the quality that is out there for free. Without emulation, we wouldn't have the nostalgia mini consoles, Bluetooth retro controllers, and DAC games. Oh wait, let's ignore that one. But let's not mistake emulators for illegally downloaded ROMs. Notice the difference. Emulation is a computer system recreated into a different architecture. Yeah, I made that definition on the fly. You can borrow that one, Webster. And ROMs are just read-only memory dumped into a file. When people say ROMs, they usually include other forms of archived media, including CDs, DVDs, or the almighty Laserdisc, a proprietary medium that has a cooler name than it should. So those ROMs I mentioned earlier could potentially be pirated. That's where all the fuzz comes from. But enough of that. Retropie has an ongoing thread about where to legally get ROMs. Now, it doesn't showcase abandonware. Wait, what's Retropie, you asked? Well, it's the topic of today's video. Retropie. What is it, who made it, and how to contribute back. I love playing retro games, maybe even more than modern games. Unfortunately, playing retro games can be a chore. The fact of the reality is, these small household electronics were only designed to function until a new iteration replaced it, more so than ever. So if you have a huge collection behind you, there's a good chance a few of those discs are suffering disc rot. So it's essentially up to you to back up everything you have, because regardless of any measure you take, history will get lost. So now that I've convinced you to archive your entire collection, next step is to download emulators to play those backups. Simplest solution? Retropie. So pick up a Raspberry Pi from Ivan Upton.
Okay, here we go.
And acquire all your favorite accessories. Head over to retropie.org.uk, yes, that is a .org, and hit download. The Retropie you downloaded and flashed to an SD card is actually a culmination of Raspberry OS, which is now called Raspberry Pi OS, RetroArch, Emulation Station, and as well as the Retropie setup script itself. The user uses this script to install, uninstall, update, and for some, configure settings. The Retropie setup script can be installed onto Raspberry as a standalone application for those unsure of commitment. Lastly, while the application was originally designed for the Raspberry Pi, hence the name obviously, there have been builds made for x86 and those Odroids. The setup script itself is designed to give the user a simplified way to turn their Linux machine into a video game console. But where did it come from? Well, the Retropie project was started in 2012 by Florian Mueller in Germany. He wanted to create a script that could easily set up RetroArch along with an emulation station front end, specifically for his pet rock block adapters. Now, RetroArch is a well-known open source project that puts together many different open source emulators under one umbrella. There's more to it, but I don't want to get into details. Emulation Station is a front end made by another team, but has since been abandoned, so the folks at Retropie basically maintain it now. Jules Wills later came onto the project because of the Picade. By the way, that's one of my favorite emulation devices I own, but you've probably seen my previous videos. And I actually picked one up because of Low Spec Gamer. So check out that video. There are so many others involved, so many people, some creating artistic assets such as Ruverick, who made the Carbon Emulation Station theme, which is basically the default theme that you'll see firsthand, and actually looks really nice. It's the theme I use, and I'm sure a lot of people do. Then there's Herb Fargas, Gizmo98, Dink Cushions, HHR Romic, and PS Psych Fate 3. Now, all these names I got from the Retropie organization GitHub, so sorry if I get any of your names wrong. You've probably noticed I've been referring to Retropie as a project and not a product. That's because unlike a piece of software a company creates, it's an ongoing project where many people, sometimes even strangers, participate to create something unimaginable to any corporate entity blind by the dollar signs. This is called open source, a term you've probably heard me say a couple times. So what's open source, you've asked? Well, I'm glad you asked. According to opensource.org, generally, open source software is software that can be freely accessed, used, changed, and shared in modified or unmodified form by anyone. Open source software is made by many people and distributed under licenses that comply with the open source definition. As the definition said, there are actually many different licenses a project can use. Sometimes, if a project is big enough, it may contain multiple open source projects with different licenses. As long as the overall project follows the strictest license, it's free to contain that within the project. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics about licenses, but if you have some free time, look into some of the most popular ones. So depending on the license, it might be free to use commercially, or maybe it's copyleft where it can only be used in a free and open setting. As we move further into the future, it seems more and more code ends up being open source because crowdsourcing ends up being a more effective way to maintain code. A company can drop a huge investment in proprietary code that needs to be maintained by a very specific programmer, or they can just license an equivalent block of code for free as long as they contribute back to it. There's clearly a better option here. Now with Retropie, it has a lot of copyleft material in there, so they can't nor do they want it to be commercial. So it's up to the community to keep it afloat. This is where the point of this video comes in. I've been enjoying Retropie for a few years now and have always been curious about contributing back to the project. Obviously, the first option is to browse their issues on GitHub and see if there are any specific issues you can troubleshoot or fix. I'd love to do this one day, but I'm not a competent programmer, and am sure I'll just end up throwing spaghetti into their code. So today, I want to brainstorm non-programming options for contributing to the overall Retropie project. These could be considered for similar projects such as Batacera, but honestly, a lot of these projects share the same parts, such as RetroArch and the databases they scrape from. So let's begin on the Retropie site. We'll see a page called Development. Here they list a few ways to help the project progress just a bit further. They specify that the project is freely available on GitHub. The three examples are contributing code, helping fellow Retropie users on the forum, or simply donating money. So first off, if you wanted to, you could donate money via their site or Patreon for those of you in the ecosystem. Think of it as a bit of encouragement to keep the project alive and growing. In fact, according to Jules, they give a portion of that money to RetroArch, probably because a big portion of Retropie is RetroArch. They mentioned helping fellow users on their forum is helping, but in my opinion, this could also include helping people on Reddit, the YouTube comment section, or maybe you know how to make a tutorial on something that they just added to Retropie. Basically, by making the complicated more simpler for others, you are ultimately contributing to the project. Something one could do is contribute to other parts that make the overall Retropie experience. You can update a database of games for users to scrape. Who knows, maybe that one obscure game you played and are nostalgic for, maybe needs some images and a description. If you consider yourself artistic in nature, consider designing splash screens, emulation station themes, bezels, or other assets for fellow users to freely use. Finally, the last thing I could think of is experimentation. While there are a lot of people who work really hard maintaining the script, making sure bugs are not present, they might not have time checking everything. I mean, it's not like they have a fully decked out QA team. So poke around and give all the information to the team on the forum or GitHub if you feel comfortable doing that. Experiment with RetroArch settings and share your results. Or test out that other new open source project that seems like a perfect companion for Retropie. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as there are enough people passionate, the project will continue growing. So those small additions you add to the project ends up becoming huge because of the numbers. And it's what makes open source so amazing. Big world problems get tackled every day because a bunch of strangers come together and work on a project, all with the same goal in mind. If you have a Raspberry Pi and you've been enjoying Retropie, enjoy it for what it is, and try to make some time to actually play the game. Because we probably are spending 80% of the time tinkering these machines. But of course, this doesn't end with me. I hope that this is a start of a discussion. I hope there are more ideas out there that I haven't had a chance to think about. So if you have any ideas, or if you have contributed in the past yourself, let me know down below. Let me know what that experience was like. And let me know if you now have plans to contribute yourself.